Living in a mobile home has been great for us. But one thing I noticed soon after moving in is that there were some design flaws that I was going to have to deal with. There were actually 5 of them right here in this family room. So today I'll actually walk you through what those design flaws were and how I fixed them. Yes, some of these things are mobile home specific, but we all have those issues in our home, whether it's an awkward shaped room or our furniture just doesn't quite fit where we want it to, or things that just don't functionally work properly. So one of the first things that we did actually soon after moving into this house was remove all of those little strips where the drywall meets together. Obviously for movement purposes, they don't mud and tape the drywall together. So you have these little strips that are covered over the seam. So since this home is never going to be going anywhere, we started removing the strip. Then here in the family room, we took the bottom half that already had a wainscoting on it, but it was just a plain paneling, and we sectioned it out and put a chair rail up so that it looked a little more appropriate. Then on the top half, we actually did a drywall compound and did a texture technique throughout the entire room. And that covered in where those cracks were. Now with some settling, we have actually had some, the joint compound has cracked a little bit and has kind of settled in. So I honestly could go over it again, but I'm not sure if I really want to stay with the textured walls. Remember, we moved in this home in the early 2000s, so it was starting to fade out of popularity, but it was still kind of popular. So would I do it again? At the time, absolutely. Now, I probably would spend some more time learning how to drywall. So the next problem that we had in this space was the awkward slope to the ceiling. What that does is on this feature wall, it creates an asymmetrical look. And then with the built-ins and there were just too many angles. So to remedy that problem, we did a couple different things. I completely color drenched the entire wall, and that all the built-ins, all the wall, all the fireplace, mantle, everything. So you don't see so many things being broken up. It's a rather small wall anyways. The room is only about 12 feet wide. So what that did was make things much more proportionate. The other thing is the previous mantle that was there just, well, I couldn't even sit a candlestick on top of it because it only come out of the wall maybe about 4 inches. And it just wasn't substantial enough. On top of that, there were just some design flaws there were just some things that were awkward about it. So I beefed up the mantle itself and the surround. I raised it up just slightly so that it was a little more proportionate with the ceiling height. Then what actually we can do is with the candlesticks, or what I place on the shelves, actually helps bring your eye to a more symmetrical look. I keep things on that mantle very, very symmetrical so that, one, it looks a little higher end when it's symmetrical, but as well as it helps trick your eye to think that the ceiling isn't quite as sloped as it is. I also kept things on the shelves in a very symmetrical manner. There are the votive candles on this side and votive candles on this side. One solid piece in the middle over here on the top shelf and one solid piece over here on the top shelf, so that it kind of kept things symmetrical. The other thing that I did was when I added those picture frame lights, I actually added them at the same level. Before, there was some strange kind of molding that just kind of floated across there, and that was their attempt at trying to bring the shelves to kind of bring the shelves in your eye to an even level, but it wasn't working. So the top shelf on this side, you couldn't even put anything on because it was too close to the top, and then this section over here, obviously you couldn't put anything on that top shelf because there actually wasn't even a shelf there. It was just molding that was floating in the front. So by removing that and then placing those picture frame lights at the same level, now it creates that symmetry all the way across, and you don't get that asymmetrical lopsidedness. The other issue, like I said before, is that this room is only 12 feet wide. The issue is it's about 25 feet long. So that makes it a long and narrow space. At the time, the cable was already wired for this wall over here to put the TV on. So that's where we actually put our TV. And then I had to try to create a space around that where we could congregate as a family and fit all three of my boys and still have room on the floor for them to move around. What that did is it actually created another awkward space behind the couch that I really never knew what to do with. And until this recent makeover, I didn't do anything with it at all, actually. So what we did is I created a little beverage station over here in the one corner where we keep, beverages that are just easy to get to. And then with the old suitcase transformation on top, made it into a little beverage station. Another design flaw is that because the ceilings are sloped, they're only about 7.5 to 8 feet on this side and then 10 feet on the opposite side. So with the ceiling being so low on this side of the room, what I did was, and this is something that I've learned through Rebecca Robeson. If you've not caught her on YouTube, please sure to look her up. So what I did was took my curtain rods, took them all the way up to the very tippy top of the ceiling, as well as I used that same color all the way, the floor length curtain. So it created a little more height on this wall, on this side where the ceilings are really low. And another common problem, and this has changed throughout the years, this home was built in 1996. So this actually has different wall materials than, say, an earlier built home. In 96, things really started changing inside of mobile homes to where today, I think the drywall is actually full size, but I could be wrong. So don't quote me on that. But this particular one has 3/8 inch thick drywall. Most homes have 5/8 inch thick drywall. Where that creates a problem is hanging things on the wall. The other issue is that our studs are 24 inches apart versus a typical home. The studs are 16 inches apart. So with the fact that the drywall is thin, you can't put in a typical anchor, a drywall anchor, because it actually leaves space in between where the anchor hits and holds onto the back of the drywall and where you're hanging the piece. So it wants to pull, which then pulls out of the wall. The other issue is because the studs are so far apart, the typical thing would be to make sure you're hanging where the studs are. For one thing, they're in peculiar places, but the other thing is that because they're 24 inches apart, it doesn't allow you much space to really hang things and get them proportionate and symmetrical on a wall. So what I did in this family room was, where I knew I wanted to hang a lot of pictures, I actually created a layered effect by taking old doors and old windows, and I hung them on the studs on the wall. So since the doors and the windows are securely fastened into the studs of the wall, I then can hang anything I want to on the fronts of those windows and into the wood of the frames of the windows and on the doors without any issues of the things falling off or pulling out of the wall. Now that I showed you everything that needed to be fixed in this room, let me show you how the makeover actually came together. But first, I have something really fun to share with you. So I am a firm believer that absolutely everything can be painted. That is, if you have the right primer. Just like a lot of the makeovers that I did in this room, I had to have the right primer for the right project. So since I get this question a lot, I decided to go ahead and make a primer guide that details when to use a primer, how to use a primer, and which primer you should pick. So I have the whole guide that'll tell you project by project what it is that you're actually going to be working on and which primer you would like to use. You can print it out and take it into your local hardware store, or you can just download it on your phone and so then you have it with you at all times. If you would like that primer guide, go ahead and click the QR code that's right down here and it'll be sent to your inbox immediately. Okay, back to the makeover. So I'll start with how I finished this wall. So where we left off, if you've been following along in the makeover series, we did the lamps. We had the window wall one up first. I added some pictures, did the clay light switch cover, but then it needed those extra added touches. So the painting that was up here that we bought in the Bahamas, I felt like it needed something. It was just making, with the frame on it, it just made it so small. So, and there was really nothing else light on this wall either, so it's the light frame just stuck out too much. So I actually painted the frame in the same coloring to make it look like the whole thing is a painting. So it enlarged that painting considerably. And to keep your eye moving throughout the entire wall, I added some pieces of artwork over here along the window. So we've got a little pop of pink in here, and then some other artwork over here that has also those pinks. It has some pinks, the yellows, and the same blues that were in all of the other paintings to keep your eye rotating throughout this whole wall. And to also, I also took some oyster shells and we decoupaged those so that they actually look like pieces of artwork rather than, you know, things from the ocean. I also had a few things of architectural salvage around that we added in here, the little doorknobs. And then I built this shelf. It is not an antique shelf, even though it looks like it is. I took some scrap lumber that I had and added some wood U-bend to the bottom and then just fastened it to the window. So now we have a cute little shelf to add just a little more depth. I also took some clay and tried to make a vase. It's not exactly perfect, and I'm going to keep working on that. And then I flanked each side of the credenza with these dining chairs so that there was symmetry on both sides, and I covered the seats in a leopard print because I think that that leopard print just adds a little bit of class, and it's kind of like black. A little bit of leopard in a room or a little bit of black in a room kind of grounds the space a little bit. You may also notice, again, if you've been following along, that there's a few things missing from this credenza area as well. And that's because after I got everything on the wall, when I had the picture frames all on this credenza, it just felt too cluttered and too just, it took away from the wall itself, as well as you couldn't really appreciate the picture frames either that I painted. So they're actually scattered throughout the room so that then also a little bit of color is then also scattered throughout the room. I also took these photos that were actually, I picked the frames, the photos, everything up at a thrift store. They were only $8 for both of them, and they're really nice, solid frames. But the frames were black, so I went ahead and painted them gold, and the mat was actually a brown color, which just didn't look right. So I painted it in my teal color, and I think it fits perfectly in here. I might want to add some sort of plant with a plant stand or something over in this corner, but I haven't quite found the right piece. So I actually shopped. This lamp from another place in my house was actually in my office, and it really wasn't being used over there. So I brought it in here, and I think it fits just right. Now this area on this wall has been the bane of my existence since we moved in. This cabinet below obviously is completely disproportionate to the size of the TV. We've obviously upgraded the size of the TV, and this cabinet is on its last leg. It is all particle board. So it really needs to go. But the reason why it's still here is because what I'd actually like to do is take the TV and put it over the fireplace, which I know is controversial, but since we don't have very high ceilings, it's not going to be too high. It's actually will be right at the same height, but also we don't ever use our fireplace, so it's never going to get hot. But what that's going to do is open up a whole new seating arrangement. And from there, I can go ahead and we want to get 2 chairs for my husband and I, and then 2 sofas so that it actually will create more seating in here and more of a conversation type atmosphere versus, just outlining the walls the way it is right now.